Hello. What a rousing greeting, and I thank you for that. I'm fired up to perform really well based on that greeting. I'm Tom Webster, and I am a partner with Sounds Profitable. We're the trade organization for the podcast industry, and I'm going to talk a little bit today about audio. Audio in particular. I'm kind of an audio guy, and I know podcasting with video has become kind of the, video has kind of become the talk of the town with podcasting. But I want to talk about audio today because I think it's audio that is really the heart and soul of what podcasting really is. And when I talked about this talk that I was giving on LinkedIn this week, I sold it that I was going to break the law. And I am in fact going to break the law, and you're going to help me do that. Are you down for that? Are you down for a little? Yeah. All right. If you're down for a little civil disobedience, I'm going to break the law. I'm going to play one syllable. One syllable. And I guarantee this one syllable will cause a reaction. I'm going to bet that this one syllable will make you react in some way. You willing to take that bet? Sure. All right, here it is. I'll do it again. Now, two things just happened. Number one, you smiled. Thank you. Number two, a phalanx, and I mean a phalanx of lawyers from 20th Century Fox got into a black van armed with rifles, and they're on their way here now to shoot me in the face because that is a copyrighted sound. And it's kind of surprising to me that there are only a few hundred of these. Of all the things that you can copyright and trademark, there's only like 200 or 300 copyrighted sounds. And that is one of them. And it brought a smile to your face, and it worked. It worked on a visceral level with you, right? You're familiar with it. You've heard it over and over again because it has an effect, because audio has an effect. And there was, as I mentioned, there's only like a couple of hundred copyrighted sounds. I'm going to play you the very first copyrighted sound in US history. Let's see if you recognize it. NBC, right? On the vibes. And there's only a few, like I said, there's only like a few hundred of these. And the intel inside, you can probably do that in your head. The dough of The Simpsons is a trademarked, copyrighted thing. I will be shot dead by the end of this session. But even if they're not trademarked, even if these are, sounds that are not protected by law, they have an effect, right? Even if they're not copyrighted by law. I'm going to play you a sound and see if this does not put you in a place. Now, if you were at Chili's and you heard that sound, you would know what it was. You would know that it was the sound of fajitas. Fajitas do not actually, by nature, make that noise. It's just water thrown on a hot plate. But if you walked into a Chili's and you were thinking, you've already had a bad day, I'm going to tell you, because you've walked into a Chili's. It's already not a great day. But you've walked into a Chili's, and maybe you were going to have the Baja chicken salad. We all love the Baja chicken salad. But you heard that noise. Maybe you changed your mind. Maybe you're going to have the fajitas, right? And it's just water thrown on a hot plate. But that noise, that is a definite thing that Chili's did to make you want to order more fajitas. That sound, right? That sound had an effect. That sound had an influence. And that influence is not always a good thing for you. It could also be harmful, as it potentially was for this poor soul. But music and sound and audio has an effect on you that is different to what video has. And it's influential. And that's really what I want to talk about today. And I'm going to share some research. I'm going to share some new data that we have not released from Sounds Profitable. But ultimately, what I want you to think about how audio actually influences our lives in ways that video absolutely does not, right? I'm going to play a little piece of audio here. I'm not going to play the whole thing, but it's the piece of audio that got me into this business. And I'm not a young man. I'm not particularly old, but I am old enough to remember Paul Harvey. And the first time that I heard Paul Harvey on the radio tell a story, I was completely rapt. I could not see anything. I could not, all that I had was theater of the mind, right? All that I had to think about was what he was describing. And when he talked about this, when he told this story, I was completely rapt.
And on the 8th day, God looked down on his planned paradise and said, I need a caretaker. So God made a farmer. God said, I need somebody willing to get up before dawn, milk cows, work all day in the fields, milk cows again, eat supper, then go to town and stay past midnight at the meeting of the school board. So God made a farmer. God said, I need somebody willing to sit up all night with a newborn colt and watch it die, then dry his eyes and say, maybe next year. I need somebody who can shape an axe handle from a persimmon sprout, shield a horse with a hunk of car tire, who can make harness out of hay wire, feed sacks, and shoe straps, who planting time and harvest.
He did this on the radio. It's bananas to me that he did this on the radio. And then right after that, he would do an ad. He would do an ad immediately after that. Page 2, my friends, loose stool, never let it trouble you again, right? Like right after that, an ad for like, cattle feed or something like that. But that audio completely captures you. And the reason it does that is because audio reaches the brain faster than video reaches the brain. It's a true fact. I'm kind of a scientist. I'm not going to lie about this. When you see things, when video enters your brain, it goes through a 6-step process. It comes in as electricity. It gets converted to chemicals by, whatever's going on behind either your normal eyes or your bug eyes, depending on how your eyes work. And it gets converted from a chemical and then back to electricity, right? It's a 6-step process. There's a bit of a delay that happens. When information enters your brain, there's a bit of a delay, and then it gets processed into electricity. It just happened now. Okay, bad joke. That's not what happens with audio. What happens with audio is as information enters your ear, it tickles those little hairs in your ear and is instantly electricity that gets converted into your brain. And that's why in just a second, you know that you love Nickelback. Look at that graph. Look at that graph, right? It just takes a second to know that you do or do not like a sound, right? It takes a millisecond. So it enters your brain faster. It enters your brain quicker. But more than that, it's also part of the human tradition around campfires, storytelling, the oral tradition, right? And I know we're all hot on video right now. And believe me, video is a very important part of podcasting and what it is that we're talking about here. But it is audio that gets to your heart and your soul much, much quicker. I'll give you a really quick example of that, right? Here's a piece of text. This piece of text, even presented as a video, is probably not going to move you to any action, right? That's a nice piece of copy. If there are copywriters in the audience, you'll look at that and you'll say, all right, there's some professional copywriting there. But I'm going to tell you that the audio of that copy elected a president. This audio elected Ronald Reagan. And I've been in polling and political polling for most of my career. And I can guarantee you that this audio had a lot to do with Reagan getting elected. It was Hal Riney, a magnificent ad man, who put this to paper and then put this to audio. You kind of believed him. Now, you may not be a Reagan supporter, I don't think he's running again. But regardless, right, it is the audio that had this effect on you. It is the audio that moved you because it happens in your mind. It happens in your mind. It happens faster than video, and it happens on a more visceral level than video. So I want to talk to you a little bit today about the influence of audio and how audio is moving us and how audio moves us to make choices, how audio moves us with purchase behavior, audio moves us with branding in all sorts of ways. But I also want to address a little bit about why video podcasting, why we're talking about it so much. Because I don't think it's necessarily all about video. I don't. And we have kind of the receipts to prove that, which is what I'm going to talk a little bit more about today. So I'm going to show you some research that some of this we have released, but some of this we have not released. That's completely brand new for South by, which I'll get to in just a moment. But we produced the largest publicly available study of podcasting in America. We do this through Sounds Profitable with the help of our sponsors, and it's produced with our research partners at Signal Hill Insights. It's a study of over 5,000 Americans 18 plus, and we ask them all kinds of questions about what they watch, what they listen to, why they do the things that they do, and all of this gets folded up into this study, The Podcast Landscape, and we've released a whole bunch of stuff from this over the past year. First thing I want to tell you is when you ask Americans 18 plus if they have ever consumed a podcast, over half of Americans are at least monthly consumers of podcasts, whether that's audio or video, right? So when was the last time that you consumed a podcast, either audio or video? 37% in the last week, another 16% in the past 30 days. That's 53%. That's over half of Americans say they have consumed a podcast in some way in the last month, right? So it is a mainstream behavior. It is a mainstream part of American life. What percentage, if any, of the podcasts that you consume are on video? And I want you to really think about this graph for a moment, because we talk a lot about video podcasts. We talk a lot about the top, if you look at the top 50 podcasts in America, video is driving them, or at least they're on video, right? They're available on YouTube. But the dominant modality for podcast consumption is audio. 47% of podcast consumers say that less than a quarter of the podcasts they consume are on video. So audio is the dominant modality. We are talking about video for some of the biggest hits, where video is making a lot of noise right now because YouTube is making a lot of noise right now. But let's not get it twisted. Podcasting is absolutely an audio dominant platform. I took a closer look at these two groups of people, the 14% who say that they watch more than 75% of their podcasts, and the 47% who say they listen to most of their podcasts. Call them audio primes and video primes. And again, there are triple the number of audio primes than video primes, right? So audio is absolutely the dominant modality for podcasting. When you look at the video primes, and you look at what they have, the video media that they've consumed in the last month, it's pretty high, right? 72% have watched premium streaming TV, another 70% free ad-supported TV, 51% the TikTok, right? So there's a lot of video consumption happening with the video primes. When you look at this same piece of data with the audio primes, it's no different. It's no different, right? Video is huge. Absolutely. Whether you're an audio prime or a video prime, you're still consuming an enormous amount of video, right? TikTok is still about half. Free ad-supported TV, premium streaming TV. These numbers are only a couple of percentage points different from the video primes. So these aren't different humans necessarily. It's really kind of down to the show and how they found it. And for some podcast consumers, that show is a video podcast, and that's how they consume it. For most, it's an audio podcast, and that's how they consume it. But regardless, whether you're an audio prime or a video prime, you're still watching an awful lot of video. Compared to a year ago, are you spending more or less time with the following media? Audio primes and video primes are both telling us they're spending more time with YouTube, right? There's no difference there, not really. It's a very small statistical difference there. So even for those who say their dominant modality for consuming podcasts is audio, they're telling us they're spending a lot more time with YouTube. How did you discover your favorite podcast? For the video primes, those people who spent 75% of their podcast consumption with video podcasts, not a surprise, right? YouTube, 66%, how they discovered their favorite podcast, 24% searching the internet, 20% Instagram. Audio primes, no different. Numbers are a little bit smaller, but even for people who say that they consume 75% or more of their podcast by audio, they're finding them on YouTube. So what we're talking about here is not necessarily that video is eating podcasting. Thank you. Thank you very much. I've waited all day for that. What we're talking about is the role that YouTube is having in discovering podcasts. It's not necessarily where people are listening to their podcasts or watching their podcasts, but they are discovering them on YouTube. How easy or difficult was it for you to find the last podcast that you discovered? If you're a video prime, you found it much easier than if you were an audio prime, right? That's because YouTube's really good at this. And again, I'm talking specifically about YouTube, right? Who has found a new podcast to consume in the last month? Video primes are much more likely to say that they have found a new podcast. And again, this is down to the app, I think. This is down to YouTube being a really good app, not necessarily down to podcasting going video, or that that video is the future of podcasting. Video is an option. We're talking about YouTube, right? Compared to listening to a podcast on an audio-only service, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, is YouTube a better or worse podcast experience? 64% say it's better. No one says it's worse, right? It's a better app. It's really good. You've all spent time on it. Probably most of you have spent time on it today. Why is using YouTube for podcasts better? Well, you have this top answer here. YouTube is where I consume other content. It's the screen in front of you, right? It's a really good app. Video is very important to me. Okay, that's definitely a video prime, but it's easier to use. There's more engagement. YouTube has comments. Those are kind of app-driven things. People like to use the app. So again, it's not necessarily about video podcasts. It's about the app that you're using, and that YouTube is actually a pretty good app. Now here's some new data. We haven't released any of this yet. Do you ever consume video content, such as YouTube or TikTok, with the tab in the background, with the video minimized or behind a lock screen, so you just get the audio? Almost half of YouTube users say yes, they have, right? That is the hard truth here. That is what we're talking about. That people use the app to discover content, but they're not necessarily looking at it. And that's what these people, 45% of the people that have consumed video online, are telling us, that they are actually not even looking at the screen. It is the audio that they're there for. YouTube is their access to it. It's a better app for them, potentially, but they're listening and they are not watching. What are they doing? Well, they're doing inside housework, they're cooking, they're exercising, they're doom scrolling, they're eating, they're doing hobbies, they're doing all kinds of things, but they're doing these things because they can listen. And when they can listen and not have to watch, that's how podcasts become a real companion to them. And that's really the influence of podcasting and the influence of audio, is that it is something that accompanies you. It is something that you can take with you. It is something that you can do other things while you're consuming it, right? And that's not necessarily something you can do with video specifically. If you take anything away from this session, besides the cheering crowd who clearly loved this, and I thank them for that, it's this. It is that YouTube is important, but it's not necessarily video that is important to podcasting. It is the app that is great. And YouTube is a great app. but it's not necessarily the backbone of what we're talking about with podcasting. So I want to give you a couple of examples, and this is all new data. This is stuff that we have not released at all about the potential power and influence of audio and of audio podcasts, especially as a companion. And when I think about a companion, the first thing I think about actually is companion podcasts to TV shows. I don't know if you've ever listened to the Chernobyl podcast. That was incredible. There are a lot of different podcasts that are associated with TV and films that I've listened to. I was just thinking about Raised by Wolves. I know, Brian, you and I enjoyed that show a great deal. The podcast for Raised by Wolves made that show make sense for me, because otherwise it was pretty wild, right? So that's an important part, I think, of what audio can do. And I know there's a lot of film and television and associated things here at South by. What podcasting can do as a companion to that, entirely driven by audio, I think is incredibly powerful. We asked people, if for each type of podcast, how likely would you be to listen? This is with the American public 18+. A podcast about a favorite TV show or movie, 53%. A podcast produced by a favorite TV show or movie, 50%. And a podcast hosted by a favorite celebrity or creator from another medium, 47%. It's with the American public, not just podcast listeners. These things can drive people to podcasts because they're curious. They want to know more. They want to be a part of the shows. They want to engage with the creators. They want to engage with potentially the actors, but they certainly want to engage with people who know what's going on, who can give you that kind of deeper insight into what's happening on the show. Which of the following types of podcasts have you consumed? This is with podcast listeners. A podcast featuring interviews with actors or directors, a podcast that reviews TV shows or movies, a podcast that about one specific TV show or movie, a podcast about one specific TV show or movie that is produced by that show, and then just a rewatch podcast. And I listen to some rewatch podcasts as well, right? These are huge drivers. So even with video, which this is what we're talking about here, there is an audio component. There is an audio companion that is incredibly effective, that sits alongside what is happening with the video, what is happening with the TV show, what is happening with the movie, right? Which of the following best describes how you feel about podcasts focused on specific TV shows or movie? They help me keep up with shows. They make me want to tune into those shows more. They make me want to watch similar shows. They make me want to watch shows for the first time. They make me feel more connected to the stars. They make me. That's influence. They make me do these things. They are at least associated with behaviors that I think people producing film, TV, art would like to encourage, right? Because they're a companion. You can take them with you. And then, which, if any, of the following actions have you taken after consuming a podcast about a TV show or movie? You've talked to friends about it, 44%. You've rewatched it. You've searched for more info about the cast or show. You've watched it for the first time. You've followed it. Or you've purchased a streaming subscription to watch the show. That's podcasting driving that. That's podcasting driving those behaviors because it's different, right? It's different to video. It's different because it's a companion. It's a thing you can take with you. It's a thing that you develop a relationship with. It's a thing that has influence. So there's no question in my mind that podcasting and audio podcasts as a companion to things like video are incredibly important. They're a force multiplier. They're also incredibly important for brands. And I want to end here with some data that we're actually going to release this coming week on Wednesday. I showed you this graph before, but I ignored this last bit here. A podcast about a favorite brand or product. A podcast about a favorite brand or product, it's almost as high as a podcast hosted by a favorite celebrity or creator. That's kind of bananas. That was an easy thing to gloss over. I will not allow you to do that, my friends. People love their products. They love their brands. People have brands that they're passionate about, that are part of their lives, right? And they are absolutely as willing, and this again is with the general public 18 plus, not just podcast listeners. They're absolutely willing to consume content about the brands that they love, if they can only find it. It's almost as high as the numbers here for celebrities and TV and film, right? That is completely no joke. That is something to absolutely consider if you're a brand, that people want to hear your story. People want to hear what it is that you have to say about the brand, about how it's used. People are curious about it, right? If you ever walked into a Trader Joe's, you're curious. Why are you people acting like this? What is going on, right? Brands have stories, and people want to hear those stories. We're going to release a research report this week on Wednesday on the power of branded podcasts with our partners at Jar Audio. And I want to break that stat that I just showed you, the percentage of people that say that they would likely listen to consume a podcast about a favorite brand or product. It's that 15 plus that 28 that I showed you, right? But I want to look at these people in particular. 15% of Americans say they would be very likely to consume a podcast about a favorite brand or product. Now, I don't know about you, I'm a conservative New England man. I'm not very likely to do anything. But in a survey, when someone says they're very likely to do something, I kind of take notice of it, right? It means something. When they tick 5 and not 4, it'd be very easy to say, I don't know. So I took a closer look at these people who say they would be very, I'm not all that conservative, by the way, these people who are very likely to consume a podcast about a favorite brand or product. And they have some really interesting characteristics. First of all, when you ask them how often do you listen to podcasts with other people, they are significantly more likely to do that. They are force multipliers for not just the brands, but for podcasting in general, right? They're evangelists, they're advocates, they are ambassadors for the medium, they are ambassadors for the brand, and a podcast gives them something to talk about. Do people in your social circle ever recommend podcasts to you? This is with that 15% who are brand fans. 74% say yes, and another 76% say that they recommend podcasts to other people. Those are significantly higher numbers than the people who are not in that brand fan group. These are evangelists. They talk about shows, they talk about podcasts, they talk about brands. And podcasts give them a vehicle for that passion. They give them a vehicle to share that influence, which is what we're talking about here today. And this question, to me, is the money question of the whole thing, I think. Does a company's involvement make you more or less likely to try a new podcast? Nobody said much less. But look at the percentage who said much more likely or somewhat more likely, right? Overwhelming majority of these people say that a company's involvement with a podcast makes them more likely to listen to it because it's a mark of quality. It's a mark of something that they care about. They care about these brands, they care about these products, they make their lives better, they give them identity, potentially. They care about them, and they are much more likely to consume content, really audio content, that is related to those brands and products and companies that they care about, right? And that is the influence of audio. Just as Homer Simpson influenced you to smile at the beginning of this, just as the people clapping next door erroneously at my success influenced you to smile, audio influences you in so many ways because it's a part of your life, it's a companion, it's something you can take with you, it's something that you can do other things with, and it's always there for you. We are going to release that research that I just showed you this week in a free webinar. You can hit that QR code, which QR, believe it or not, I understand stands for QR. I don't even know what QR code stands for, but I'm sure the Q stands for QR. But you can hit that there, register for this webinar. But ultimately, the story that I hope that you walk out of here with today is that, yes, video is important, but specifically it's YouTube that's important, I think, to podcasting for a number of reasons, for comments, for engagement, but audio is the driving dominant force of podcasting. It is influential, it's a thing you can take with you, it's a thing that's a part of your day, and it's kind of why I'm standing here today. So with that, I will close. I'm happy to take any questions you might have in the time that you have. Yeah, oh, thank you. And by the way, my mentor in business, in my life, the late Frank Cody, once told me, no one will hate you for ending early. And so that's what I'm going to do.